There is a lot of concern. It's obviously an incredibly tense situation here in Kiev. The central government, the new government here, is shaky at best. There's an interim president, a new prime minister. Prime minister saying that this country is on the brink of disaster. Most people here, certainly the government here, is hoping there's some sort of diplomatic effort that can solve this crisis, that can put an end to this crisis. They're saying the government in Kiev, they are not willing to let Crimea go, that will not happen. But whether or not they could stop that is very much an open question. And while they're hoping for diplomacy and looking to the West for some sort of diplomatic solution, they're also calling up their reserve forces. I was out in the square behind me today, or earlier. It's now covered in fog, so you can't really see it, and darkness has come. A lot of people there giving their names to authorities, saying that they are willing to fight. Young men, old men, well beyond military age, saying they are willing to do whatever is necessary in order to keep Ukraine unified. That's the message here that many people have. Whether or not that can happen, though, a lot is going to depend on what Vladimir Putin decides to do next, Wolf. As you said, they are all over Crimea. The big concern many people have here is whether or not Russian forces might actually go into eastern parts of Ukraine, other Russian-speaking areas. If that happened, that would be a major escalation. No sign of that at this point. But there is real concern about what the next step for Vladimir Putin is, Wolf.
Because it's clear to everyone that the Ukrainian military is really, under the worst of circumstances, would be no match for the Russian military, which is so much more powerful, so much more advanced. So the key, as you correctly point out, and this according to U.S. officials as well, keep the Russian troops in Crimea, but if they start moving eastwards towards where you are in Kiev, that would escalate the situation dramatically. Is there a real concern in Kiev with the Ukrainian government that the Russian military might actually move towards the east?
There's concern. Basically, everybody here you talk to has that concern. For them, that obviously would be the ultimate act of declaration of war. They already see this as a declaration of war. But to move into eastern parts of Ukraine, and that's the borders of Crimea are are very obvious. Less so in eastern parts of Ukraine, which areas are Russian-speaking, which areas are not. So if Russian troops were actually to move into eastern Ukraine, that would be a major escalation. But that has not occurred yet, and the focus is solely on Crimea. It is really interesting, Wolf, when you're out there just talking to people, how many men are talking about signing up? How many men are talking about being willing to fight, being willing to die to try to keep Ukraine together? They see everything that Russia has done as a provocation. They see that everything that Vladimir Putin has said, they call lies. The idea that Russian people of Russian descent were in any kind of danger in Crimea, they see as nothing more than an excuse for Russian forces to try to flex their muscles in Crimea.